Hello, I thought it's about time for some Battleship gameplay on this channel. So I'll bring you a game in my Arkansas beta. This game, it's not quite the best I've managed so far in any sense, but it's a pretty good all-round game. And it's a tier 4 match. The enemy team has the advantage in battleships, whereas our team has the advantage in cruisers. And otherwise it's all fairly even. It's on the New Solomon Islands map, and my favourite tactic here is to head up to the north and try and win the engagement here, and hopefully get back down to the south as soon as we can. Anyway, we've spotted the enemy. I tried a salvo, but that didn't work because I just ended up hitting the island. But wait for a clear shot on the Kuma. And I'm holding my fire because I want to hit it on the broadside. And there we go. Full broadside out. 7 regular hits and 1 Citadel hit. And I probably took 75% of that Kuma's health. So that Kuma's just not going to have a very good game. I decide my team's about to kill it, so I switch focus to the Phoenix behind it. But I'm not going to be able to get some shots off right now because I have to focus on avoiding those torpedoes, which by necessity means that my guns are going to be pointing the wrong direction for the next few seconds. I thought about firing at this St. Louis here because I'll be able to bring my guns on target to it sooner, but the Phoenix really is the bigger threat for my team at the moment. Fire my front turrets at the Phoenix and get a Citadel hit, does 8,300 damage. Which is about, well, a third of its health. I'm just bringing my rear turrets around now. And the Phoenix dies. I think about shooting at the Miyogi, but it's at quite an acute angle, so I'm unlikely to penetrate its armour. So, the St. Louis it is. I'm focusing down the enemy cruisers first because, well, killing cruisers is what battleships are good at. And it's just best to get their guns out of the game. So there's St. Louis, fire off, well, almost a full broadside. Turret 4 couldn't shoot because there were lifeboats in the way. And I get a Citadel hit there, and 5 regular hits, and again it's lost about 2/3 of its health. So I'm doing pretty alright so far. At least I'm managing to wreck the enemy's cruisers. Haven't got any kills yet. But I've done the lion's share of the damage, at least against these cruisers. You see me also, I'm turning my ship towards the enemy here while I'm reloading, and that's just because, well, I want to get as close as possible to the enemy in this ship. Managed to get another Citadel hit on the St. Louis, which leaves it on a tiny slither of health, so I only fire off 2 turrets, which unfortunately don't quite do enough damage, so I fire off my final turret. And there's my first kill of the game. The enemy Miyogi just died, which means it's a Kawachi and a Wakatake up at this end of the map fighting my team. Obviously I'm going to fire at the Kawachi for now, since the Wakatake is at much too long range for me to reliably hit it. But I'm unlikely to penetrate the Kawachi either, just because of the angle its armour was at. Maybe I got 3 shots, hits on target did 5,000 damage, so at least one of those penetrated. Fired a couple of shots off at the Wakatake there. But I was mainly focused on trying to dodge these torpedoes here as opposed to firing at the enemy, but the torpedoes didn't have the legs to reach me, so it turns out it was not really necessary. Now I'm bringing bringing all my turrets around really to fire at the Kawachi, but I think I'm going to have to change my broadsides if I'm going to want to stay in this engagement, and unfortunately it's going to be a long time for my rear turrets to come around. Fire my forward 2 turrets at the Kawachi, but it dies long before my shells arrive, which means the Wakatake here is the only enemy ship in a position to, well, in any way engage us. I have armour piercing loaded, and I decided I'm going to turn my ship around to bring my rear guns to bear and fire off a broadside. In doing so I was going to switch to high explosive, but unfortunately that hill, or the island there, blocks my shot. So, yeah, no effect there, and now I'm loading high explosive. And it's kind of at this point, I've been a bit indecisive up to now, because I see the southern flank our team has lost quite badly. was originally thinking I'd push down to the enemy's base, or, well, the B capture point I should say, but just looking at the enemy's team's disposition, it seems like most of the ships I'm good at killing, such as the Phoenix and the enemy's battleships, have headed towards the A point. Well, there doesn't really seem to be anyone at B that I'd be in any way effective in a fight against, so I decided to head to A. And this is a point where I'd really prefer to be in a Miyogi, because the top speed of the Arkansas just means I'm going to take, well, it's just not fast enough. I'm going to take a long time to get here. Oh, and sorry, Mr. Phoenix, I totally didn't realise you were there. So that was unfortunate. Fortunately, you didn't take a lot of damage. So yeah, having played the Arkansas a fair bit now since, well, the start of open beta, I still really like it as a ship, but I'm becoming much more aware of its limitations. And, well, there's kind of two big things that really, or three big things really, that bug me about the ship. The first is its speed. I just really value the ability to move from one part of the map to the other quickly. The second one, and probably the most important one, is that I really don't like having 4 rearward-facing turrets. It just means that when you want to change the broadsides, the way that will allow most of the guns to stay on target is to turn away from the enemy, but because of the low speed of the ship, I basically always want to be turning towards the enemy to try and close the distance. And the last thing that annoys me is those lifeboats in front of turret number 4, which are just continually blocking its fire. And just the firing arcs in general, you've got to be very flat on to the enemy to bring all your turrets to bear, so I often actually don't. You'll see that later on. Anyway, while I was talking, I fired off 2 forward turrets at this Clemson at very long range. That was mainly so I would, feel like I hadn't wasted high explosive shells I'd loaded. Now I've loaded all armor piercing, but the Clemson was still the only target in range, so I'll just fire off an armor piercing broadside at it. They all miss. But at this range, the Clemson's not really a threat to me. It's only got 5.5 kilometer range on its torpedoes, so even if it does fire them, it's not going to be able to reach me. And meanwhile, the enemy Wyoming, oh, sorry, a bit of lag here. The enemy Wyoming I'd been intending to engage is just coming within range. So I switch fire to take a look at that, and fortunately it's fairly flat onto me, and it just took a torpedo from my ally, which means that I can turn broadside onto it, and there's, well, a decent chance I might penetrate. I doubt I'll get any Citadel hits, just because at this range I won't have the penetration to get through the Citadel. But 3 hits did 2,700 damage, which isn't fantastic, but the Wyoming's a heavily armoured ship, so you can't really expect to do the massive damage that I'll do against a cruiser to a Wyoming. Guns are almost reloaded. I don't bother firing number 3 turret because it just can't come around forward enough, and I want to keep heading towards the enemy as much as I can. I want to close the distance so that I can begin to actually penetrate the Wyoming Citadel armour and start putting some really big hits into it. And also, just the closer I get, the more accurate my guns become. Of course, that's also true for my opponent, since we're basically the same ship. But I'm kind of confident in my aiming abilities. Fire off another fullish broadside there. Again, I was waiting till the ship turned roughly broadside onto me to give myself the best chance of penetrating. And did 6,200 damage with 6 shots, which was probably 1 or 2 penetrating shots and the rest over penetrating. And, well, after it takes some fire from my ally there, the Wyoming's on 126 health. And it looks like it took a few bounces there. So I turn around, bring number 3 turret to bear and fire off 2 shots, which do the last little bit of damage and finish that ship off. And then I can save the rest of my broadside for this second Wyoming. And those shells look good. No. I got 4 hits, but I aimed a bit long, so it looks like they mostly over-penetrated through the superstructure of the ship. Turret number 3's loaded, but I wait for the rest to reload so I can fire off a full broadside. It's not any particular reason for that, it's just that I like firing full broadsides because it gives me lots of time to look around and check out the minimap. Those shots look a bit better. Only 3 hits though, but they did a fair bit of damage. And the Wyoming's firing at me, and unfortunately I start turning a bit too late there. So I took a fair bit of damage myself, actually a lot of damage there. But I've still got my damage control parties to go out and fix quite a bit of that. So I'm not too concerned. And there's my broadside out. Oh, that was good damage, 4,300 from 3 hits. And now I'm turning my bow onto the enemy because I was expecting that broadside that just sunk my ally to be aimed at me. But, well, it wasn't. My ally took it instead. Just showing you how I'm facing the enemy now. And now I'm turning to starboard just to bring my rear turrets around onto the enemy. But the enemy's changing focus here. It's going to fire at the allied battleship down to my left, or my port side since we're on boats. And that's because that battleship's on much lower health than me, so I'll be able to take it out way more effectively. I get 6 hits on the enemy, do 4,000 damage, which I was a bit surprised at since I didn't expect to penetrate at this kind of angle. But actually I suppose 4,000 damage from 6 shots, those are probably 6 over penetrations through the superstructure. But well, it's kind of hard to tell about, you know, if some of them were bounces and a few penetrating shots, but the important thing is I did damage. So now I'm closing the distance, but again, because of the very acute angle, I doubt I'm going to penetrate. Still do 5,300 damage from 4 shots, but at this range I should be expecting much better. My allied battleship was just sunk by the guy in front of me, so this Wyoming's turning its broadside on to engage me, and I start turning my bow into it because I'm expecting an enemy's broadside. Our secondary batteries open up, and I've got a pretty massive advantage in this kind of fight because of my hit point lead. You see, I took a lot of damage there, had 1 turret destroyed, well, just damaged, but a few bounces there, and I'm able to open up my guns into the enemy at short range. I don't actually get any citadel hits, but I really don't need to kill it at that point. So 60 hits on the enemy is pretty good in any battleship. Sunk 3 of them. Managed 1,400 experience as my base, which I believe was doubled for the win on the weekend. Did just under 95,000 damage, and also did a little tiny bit with my secondary guns right at the end there. And yeah, that's the Arkansas. It's a pretty good battleship, although it does have its limitations. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.